Hello, I'm Tom Bailey, and in today's Speaker Stories episode, I'll be getting to know Andrew Davis, who is a keynote speaker, a best-selling author, and one of the most influential marketers in the world. So, Andrew, hello, and a very warm welcome to today's episode.
Hey, thanks, Tom, for having me. This is fun. I'm so excited about telling my story and hearing some more.
Awesome. We can't wait to hear all about it. So, whereabouts in the world are you right now, just out of interest?
Today, I am in South Florida. I live in Boca Raton, Florida.
Amazing. Thank you so much. And I just want to share just a little bit more about you before we do get started. So Andrew has written documentary films. He's worked for the Muppets and MTV, co-founded, built, and sold a marketing agency, and you may well have seen him on the Today Show or in the New York Times. So quite an incredible journey from the sounds of things. And given the topic of this podcast, I'd love to find out how important has public speaking been for you along the way on your journey?
Yeah, well, public speaking has built my my entire career. I started a marketing agency in 2001, and it wasn't until 2008 that we found that public speaking was the best way to generate business for the agency. We had tried everything else. Advertising and events and sponsorships and all sorts of other things. And all of a sudden, I would speak at an event. I was the kind of lead strategy person at the agency, and people would come up afterwards and say, "Oh my gosh, like, what do you do?" And then I tell them what they do, or they'd say, "Can you do what you just spoke about?" And I would say, "Yeah, we have an agency." The next thing you know, we had a full book of business. In fact, it got so busy that I was speaking and we would generate leads we couldn't handle, which is, I mean, a good problem to have, but a frustrating one as a business owner.
Yeah, absolutely. And did you find that you had to choose the right places to speak? Was that one of those important elements of public speaking for you?
Yeah, well, we chose what we call a fractal every year. So we would determine a new business opportunity and look at the kind of a fractal for me is a niche within a niche within a niche. It's a small enough target where you can really focus your energy and understanding the industry. Awesome. And usually we do the first speech for free in the industry. So we'd pick like multifamily housing, and we'd speak at an industry event. And that would kind of open the door to other opportunities within that industry. And we could usually build like a 3 or 4 year business cycle out of focusing on one industry a year. Awesome. And so that became really important. Yeah, it was a big aspect of the strategy that made it work.
On that, a lot of speakers that I speak to tell me that whenever they speak at an event, if they get their presentation right, they always get offered another presentation after it or another opportunity to speak. So it almost creates that snowball effect for you if you do that first one for free.
That's my goal. My goal is 4 stage side leads from every single event. And a stage side lead for me is just someone within the first 72 hours after speaking that they ask me to speak at a specific event, which means it has a date and time. It means that they're high enough up in the organization that they could, make the decision or refer me, and that they have a budget. And if those 3 things are true, then I've gotten 1 stage side lead. So my goal is 4 after every speech. And to be totally fair, just to manage everybody's expectation, the goal is 4, but right now I'm averaging about 2.78 or something per gig. So I measure all of that to make sure I know that the speech is working, that that I'm actually getting those stage side leads.
Great. I love that you've got that data and it's so accurate as well. So let's go back to the very beginning, just for a moment. So we talked about 2001. You were trying everything when you first launched that business. What's your earliest memory of having to stand up and deliver a presentation? Was it during that time, or was it way back when you were in college or university?
Well, I mean, it's a little unfair because as a kid, I was really into acting and performing and stuff. So, they weren't really speeches, but I guess a monologue, I had to learn stuff. So I was never actually afraid of performing in front of people, but I can tell you that when I started speaking for the agency, I can remember the very first time I was invited to speak, and it was actually a fluke. Like I'm one of those people that's really early, Tom, for every event I go to. And I was an attendee at a conference, and I showed up really early. I was, registered, got my badge, and this woman comes running up and says, "Oh my gosh, like, I'm so glad you're here. We had someone cancel for 10 a.m. Like, have you ever spoken in a breakout session before?" And I was like, "No." And she was like, "Well, if you have a topic and you want to deliver it, like, I've got a room at 10 a.m. So I was like, "Well, I'll take it." So I went back to my room. I skipped the opening sessions, and put together a 45-minute presentation. And I'll tell you that I was not nervous about performing in front of people. I was unbelievably nervous about the ideas I was going to present. I had severe imposter syndrome, and I thought, you know what do I know? Like, this is my first time at this conference. I came here to learn stuff. Like, who am I to be able to teach these people about this topic, you know? And I was really nervous about that. And I've come to learn that, you know, I guess over time, that my best performances and my best ideas are the ones where I actually don't need to be the expert. And in fact, I think that's a big detriment to the audience and my my process. And so all I want to do is to provide them with a solution to a real problem they're facing, but it's not the solution. It's an idea. It's one solution that you may want to try. And I'm very honest and open about the fact that I'm still investigating all this stuff. I'm looking for answers, and I'm just going to share with you what I've learned. And that's changed my perspective. And I'm no longer nervous because I don't believe I need to be the expert in the room. I just need to have a unique perspective that I want to share. And that's alleviated that imposter syndrome that I know you guys talk about a lot on the show.
Absolutely. I love that. And I guess that frame of mind is thinking about what value can I add to this audience, which is, you know, how do I offer them something tangible, something useful, a solution they can go and try. And by providing value, you're more likely to get booked again to speak at other venues. So yeah, that's a really great piece of advice. So what would you say is one thing that you know now that you'd wished you'd known back then when you first delivered that presentation in that breakout room? What's that one thing that you'd wish you could tell a younger Andrew?
It would be that that the speech is the cake, that all the marketing in the world won't make you a better speaker. It won't book you more gigs. It won't build your business. But creating a great speech that people want to hear over and over again and want to share with other people is all you need to be a great speaker. So, I mean, if I back up, I spent a lot of time and energy trying to increase my fame factor, you know, like I needed to be everywhere. I had to have followers on Twitter, and I needed to be famous. And it turns out you don't, you know, to be a surprise and delight speaker, the kind of speaker that I feel like I provide, all you need to do is provide a transformational experience for the audience. And if you can do that reliably, and that's the key, you have to be able to deliver that every single time you speak, then you'll have a very big and growing business where, you know, your business is just a referral based business and your fees increase and the bookings increase.
I love that. Can you help us understand what goes into that kind of a speech? Is there a certain building blocks that goes into a speech like that? What would you say is the core parts you need to get into that presentation?
Well, I think it boils down to, number one, having a real problem to solve. And I think too many of us try to solve a problem or 10 problems in one speech. And I think very often we don't truly understand what the real problem is that the audience is facing. So number one, understanding that. Number two, having a contextual model. A contextual model is really important. To me, I define a contextual model as like something that's simple enough you could draw on a napkin to kind of illustrate the idea, but complex enough to have deep layers of understanding and meaning for the audience. So you could talk about it for 3 minutes, but you could also dive into it and keep charting on that one contextual model for 45 minutes, and people would still have aha moments, right? Like, that's unbelievably important. That kind of demonstrates your domain expertise. It demonstrates the deep thought that's gone into the solution that you're presenting or providing for the audience. You need to have a signature bit. A signature bit for me is the 5 to 7 minutes in the speech that is so memorable that people will tell other people about that 5-minute experience or that 7-minute experience. It's really sticky, but it's not just entertainment. It has to illustrate a deep point that people previously didn't understand until they got the signature bit. Lord, that was a good list of 3. So we'll start with those. But
that was perfect. And that contextual model, because a lot of what we do is intangible. If you're offering a service, you know, you can't package it and give it to somebody. So by making it a visual, so you might look at Maslow's hierarchy of needs, the triangle, something like that.
Exactly.
And where you can talk through each layer, and then, like you said, then you can either spend 1 minute on each layer, or you can really drill down for 30 minutes on each layer if you had the time to do so. I mean, I even mean not just the one drawing, but like I'll have a quick example. Like I have a speech this year that I've been working on for the last year. It's called The Cube of Creativity, and
it's essentially 4 simple constraints you can add to any project to come up with better, more creative solutions faster. So the basics are the 4 constraints you can add, and anyone can draw a cube on a napkin and write the constraints out. But what happens is, it turns out if you divide the cube into quarters, it turns out each of the 2 corners, like the 2 constraints, actually provide an emotional aspect of the creative output. So I mean, like trying to layer the contextual model like that, like, hey, you can draw it like this, but if I have extra time, I can show you what happens and why these are, and then you can layer it again and say, if you don't do all 4 of these things, here's what happens. This is why your team falls apart.
Love it.
So the deeper you actually invest in that contextual model, the better off you'll be. I started with real simple ones, like it's the ABC model. A stands for this, B stands for this. That's like the very first version of an idea. You got to keep going until you really have dissected the idea so much that you believe this is the solution that's best to present at this time.
Yeah, love it. Great advice. And what would you say to somebody, because there's always a step between being a speaker and then being a paid speaker. I think that's always a step, and that's kind of an internal mindset step up, but also, there's also things you have to do externally. So what is that transition for you to go from a free speaker to a paid speaker?
It's all based on stage side leads. So like, here's what I do every year. Every year I come up with a new idea for a speech, brand new speech, right? Never been performed before. And I go to free speeches to just try to get the ball rolling. And, to be totally honest, it doesn't work the first 3 or 4 times, right? I'm still working out the kinks. The idea isn't good. My performance isn't great. There's no signature bit because I haven't figured one out yet, because I don't know what the audience is struggling with. But the moment I finish one of those free speeches and somebody comes up and says, Andrew, that was amazing. We have an event on March 25th. And how much do you cost? We would love to have you. When they say they want that speech, that's when I say, oh, it's $500. And then when I get 3 stage side leads from every event, I say it's $1,500. I mean, I'm making up the fees, but if you're starting out, that's the best way to think about it. When the speech is referable, then start raising the fee.
Yeah, love that. That's a great way of looking at it. I've not heard of that perspective, and that's a really good way of looking at it. Thank you. Quick question then on, I guess, so let's talk about the pandemic. I think that's quite a good place to go now. So 2019, 2 years, went into lockdown. Pretty much what it did, it killed the in-person speaking industry. I guess, how did you transition during that period, and what did you do differently?
Yeah, so I have a television background. So you mentioned that at the beginning. I worked in television for the first 10 years of my career. So I immediately thought, you know what, how can we make virtual events better than an in-person event? And I decided, you know what, the best way to do that is to turn it into a television show. So basically, I took every keynote and made it this kind of television show-like experience where I would do live segments in front of a camera in my little studio. But then all of a sudden I'd say like, hey, follow me. Let me tell you a concept out by my pool here at my house, right? And so that would be a pre-recorded little 7-minute or 5-minute segment. But it the illusion was that it was all happening real time. And, it worked really, really great. It took a lot of time to get the kinks out, to figure out how to use the production equipment that I hadn't used in 20 years. And, it all changed and the technology was different. But I think the key is trying to remember that you've got to provide an experience that is different than the in-person experience if you want to be successful in the virtual world. I have really hard opinions about why I think the virtual world is a little backwards. Easy stuff, like if you want to do a presentation on Zoom, it makes your slides real big and your head real small, right? Like that's just backwards for a cold medium like the internet. You need to be big, the person needs to be big, and the slides can be real small because you're close up. But anyway, I think there are a lot of things we could work on if you just start saying, you know what, forget about what I do in person. How can I transform this experience to be transformative for the audience, to feel different, and to keep them engaged for 45 minutes or an hour? You're going to have to think that way.
Yeah, I love the thought of making sure it's an experience, because, we've seen so many webinars over the past 2 years where you just sit there you're on PowerPoint and you're watching someone talk over their slides. Yeah, so really important. And one thing that came up for me as you were speaking a minute ago was about finding these speaking gigs. So you find these free speaking gigs, and then that'll then lead to the lead generation. I guess
Yeah.
how do you find that first speaking gig? What methods do you take to find a gig?
I mean, to be totally frank, I'm at the point at which I get so many inbound
Yeah,
inquiries
of
that,
course.
you know, for the free gigs, like I can say, hey, look, I can't, I know you can't afford me, but hey, guess what? I have a brand new speech,
Mhm.
and I'd be happy to do this brand new speech for you, you know, instead of loyalty loop, which I know is what you wanted. So
Mhm.
that works for me. But look, if you're trying to get your first gigs, the easiest thing to do, there are three simple things. Number one, I want you to reach out to 3 executives you know on LinkedIn.
Yeah.
Everybody has connection with at least one
Mhm.
executive. Reach out to them and tell them you've been working on a new keynote speech or a new speech, and wondering if you could do a lunch and learn for your staff. Here's
Love
the
it.
topic. What do you think? That's number one. Number two, I want you to reach out to all the nonprofits and professional organizations that you're a member of or a former member of, and ask the exact same thing. Hey, I know you have monthly meetups and you do educational sessions. You know, I have a new speech I'm working on. I would love to be able to deliver that to the audience free of charge to get their feedback, right?
Perfect. Yeah.
And then the third one is the most valuable one. It's a super secret underground marketplace that no one ever talks about. In fact, I'm trying to build my own little tool to help us with this. But you need to reach out to 3 other speakers, and they need to know that you have a brand new speech and that you're interested in performing it, because people like me and your peers, even if they're not busy speakers doing 55 gigs a year, they're doing 10, 12 gigs a year. They have the opportunity to refer you as well. For 3, they have opportunity for 3 reasons. One, there are gigs they might not be able to do, right? They're unavailable.
Yeah.
2, maybe they're charging for the speech and they don't want to do any free speeches, but they're getting those free inquiries, right? And 3, after every gig you complete, if you want to maintain that relationship with that event organizer so they bring you back in 3 years, you need to be able to offer them 3 great referrals to follow up from your speech this year.
Yeah.
So if you do that, if you just reach out to those 3 groups, I guarantee you can get that wheel spinning much faster than if you're just filling out, you know, speaker inquiry forms and stuff. That doesn't really work.
Yeah.
And if you're interested, by the way, and you're listening, or you're interested, Tom, in my little trial here for this referral thing I'm building, you know, let me know. I'm happy to send you guys a link, and I have a little questionnaire we need to fill out and a little process that we're working on. So I'm happy to share that with others.
That'll be great. And I guess just on that note, for anybody listening that wants to connect with you or wants to book you as a speaker, where's the best place for them to go?
Oh, let's see. I mean, the easiest place to find me is aka.drewdavis.com. That's my website. My email address is there. My phone number, you can call my cell phone, or LinkedIn. Just search for Andrew Davis, you know, keynote speaker, and you'll find me. I have orange glasses, so if you're listening to this, you'll look for the guy with orange glasses.
Awesome.
And a bow tie.
Yes, perfect. Well, Andrew, I just want to just say thank you so much again for coming along, sharing such great value with our audience. And yeah, I can't wait to watch your journey and find out where you go next.
Anytime, man. Thanks, Tom. Thanks to everybody listening too.